This is Lakea, the librarian at the Vault of Nightmares. Your vault keeper is currently tied up right now, so I will be your host this evening. Hope you enjoy.
When I was about 17 years old, I started dating this guy a few years older than myself. We had been dating for a few months when he decided we should take a trip to his grandmother's house, so the two of us could meet. His grandmother lived in a very small town of only a few hundred people, in what seemed like the middle of nowhere. We arrived at her house around dark after driving all day. The three of us chatted for a bit, ate some supper, then proceeded to go outside onto her back patio to enjoy the fall air. After about an hour or so, my boyfriend's grandmother decided to call it a night, and so she headed to bed. By this time, the woods all around our house had come to life with all types of noises that this city girl was not used to. Now, I can't remember exactly what the argument was about anymore, but I remember me and my boyfriend arguing, and I decided all of a sudden that I was leaving. So I snatched up my things and the car keys off of his grandmother's kitchen table and stormed back outside to the car. Here's where I made the first mistake. It wasn't until after I was sitting in the car with it running that I realized it was a standard shift and not an automatic. As I sat there struggling, trying to put the car into reverse, my boyfriend was climbing into the passenger side because he had realized my mistake. As he was shutting the car door, the car flew backwards about 10 feet. Still mad, I slammed the car into first gear and took off. I pulled out of the driveway and drove about a quarter of a mile up the road, and that's when my boyfriend started fussing at me and telling me what I needed to do and to shift gears. As I tried to follow his directions, I ended up stalling the car out. This was my second mistake. To keep us from rolling backwards back down the inclined road, he reached into the middle of the car and pulled the emergency brake. He then told me to hop over into the passenger seat as he got out to walk around the car to get in on the driver's side. He drove us a bit further up the road until we came across the old wagon trail on the left-hand side that could take a person into the woods and up to the old Native American burial grounds. Most of the trail was grown over with weeds except the area closest to the main road. My boyfriend pulled in onto the old wagon trail and paused to change back into reverse. This was the third and final mistake. When all of a sudden, there was a thud on the back of the driver's side of the car. Now, to understand what happened next, let me give you a few more details about that car. It was a small, old two-door Honda that ran really loud and rode really bumpy. A few weeks prior, the driver's side back glass had been busted out by a rock that, of course, had been thrown by a lawnmower. We used some duct tape and a black garbage bag to cover the broken window until my boyfriend could get it repaired. When we heard the thud sound, we both jumped in our seats and looked at each other. My heart was beating so fast at this point that I thought it was going to beat right out of my chest. As I then proceeded to turn towards the place that the sound had come from, movement of the garbage bag covering that broken back window caught my attention. I slapped my boyfriend on his arm and pointed towards the window. The next thing that happened was the most horrifying experience of my life. It seemed to take forever for my mind to register what was happening, but in reality, it was probably a few mere seconds. There, through the broken back window, was a huge, hairy, ape-like arm reaching towards me between the two front seats. As the arm got near my seat, the worst smell I had ever smelled before hit my nose. And then the screaming began. As I am staring at this arm reaching for me, my boyfriend turns around in his seat and sees it too. When he started yelling, along with my screams, that's when the car shook. Now, I'm not talking about a little shake like someone leaned against the car. I'm talking about a shake that felt like two wheels on that side of the car lifted completely off the ground. As the car rocked, my boyfriend's hands must have slipped on the steering wheel because the next thing I knew, I heard the car horn blow. Then I heard the deepest, loudest growl I had ever heard. I have never heard anything like it before or since. Following the growl, the arm jerked backwards out of the car window. My boyfriend was the first out of both of us to gain a small amount of composure. He threw the car in reverse and backwards we flew onto the main road. Thank God all of this happened around midnight and no other vehicles were coming down the road, because I am pretty sure that neither of us checked to see if it was clear. After we backed out of the wagon trail and onto the main road, we didn't waste any time taking off. I'm also pretty sure that we were going well over the speed limit that quarter of a mile or so back to my boyfriend's grandmother's house. I never did see what this creature completely looked like, but from the size of that hairy arm that reached through the window and from the deep growl that it had let out, I'm not sure that I would have wanted to see exactly what type of monster it was.
This is your vault keeper. Lakea done so well, I think we'll let her do one more. Enjoy.
Camping with Bigfoot. My name is Dale, and I wanted to share my experience with you about us camping with Bigfoot. Myself and several other guys volunteer mentoring youth boys between the ages of 12 to 16. We do activities together that teaches them to build self-esteem and good character traits. We also show them how to take care and give back to their communities. Last spring was our annual camping trip with all of the mentors and the boys. We left out from the parking lot early one Saturday morning after we had gotten both vans packed and the kids buckled in. This trip was a special one because it was our 5-year anniversary trip since the program had started. On the way to our destination, everyone was excited and in good spirits, laughing and joking. It was midday by the time that we had finally arrived at the campsite. We always used the same spot each year to camp, so we knew where we were going. We all piled out of the vans. It was myself and 3 other mentors chaperoning 8 boys. Each person donned their backpacks and grabbed a supply bag from the van. Each mentor was assigned 2 boys for the duration of the trip. After everyone gathered everything together, we marched single file into the woods to our camping spot. We spent the rest of the afternoon setting up camp and getting our fire going. Even though it was springtime and warmer during the day, it tended to get very chilly during the overnight hours. We all sat around the fire for several hours telling jokes, scary stories, and roasting our food over the fire. Things started winding down and we were all getting a bit tired, so the conversations were few and far between. I was just getting ready to suggest that we all turn in for the night when we heard what sounded like branches or limbs breaking behind us off into the woods. Me and the other 3 adults grabbed our flashlights and stepped towards the area where we heard the sounds. We shined our lights around, but we didn't see anything, thinking maybe it was just some wild animal such as a deer or a raccoon. Before we could even turn back around to where the boys were, we heard 2 of the youth scream. We dashed a few feet back to the boys to see what the problem was. Something or someone had tossed not 1, not 2, but a handful of rocks at the 2 boys, hitting them from behind. We immediately, once again, shined our lights into the woods, but now we were looking for a rock thrower and not a limb breaker. Then all of a sudden, another boy screamed to our right. He was just also hit with a rock. It felt like all of us were spinning in circles at our sight, trying to figure out what was going on and who or what was causing it. Another mentor suggested that everyone be quiet for a minute so we could see if we could hear exactly where the movement, if any, was coming from in the woods. By this time, everyone was standing still in a small huddle next to the fire. For about 5 minutes, we did not hear or see anything. Then we heard a thud. The sound came from directly in front of us. It sounded like something hitting a hard object like a tree or a boulder. Then about 30 seconds later, we heard another thud directly behind us. Then again in front of us. Now, I don't get shaken very often, but by this time, every scenario you can possibly imagine was racing through my head. All 12 of us immediately dashed for the closest tent. We all piled in, and with barely any room to move, one of the other guys lifted up our 8x8 dome tent. All of us were either sitting or kneeling at this point. Our hearts were racing what seemed like 900 beats per minute. As we were all whispering to each other, discussing what is happening and what we should do, that's when we heard it. It was the loudest growl I have ever heard in my life, right behind the tent. And let me tell you, this didn't come from any canine. Then another growl came from what sounded like the front side of the tent where the zipper to the tent was. And that is when I realized that whatever this was, there was 2 of them. The boys at the back side of the tent started screaming, and that's when I noticed that our tent was shaking. I am pretty sure that if all of us had not been there and overcrowded, the tent would have surely been flipped. Then I heard one of the adults yell, "Oh my God." When I turned toward his direction, which was back towards the front of the tent, I, along with the others, seen something walk between the tent and the campfire. The shadow of this thing was so huge that it sent the tent into complete darkness. We continued to see large shadows, and we could hear things being thrown about. The kids were yelling and screaming continuously at this point, and I threw in a couple of screams myself. One of the boys yelled, "Is this bears?" And I am telling you, there was no way these creatures, animals, or whatever they were bears. I have heard bears before. I have even seen one standing up on its back legs before. These things were massive from what I could tell by the size of their shadows and by the sounds of their deep growls. We stayed huddled together inside the tent, shaking and screaming for what seemed like forever. Finally, everything grew quiet outside the tent, and all of us inside grew quiet to see if we could hear anything else. We stayed that way, none of us sleeping or leaving the tent until daybreak. Two of the adults slowly unzipped the tent zipper and poked their heads out. After making sure it was all clear, we all filed out of the tent to survey the damage. The other 3 tents were completely torn apart and had been dragged to different locations. Our food and other supplies were scattered all about, with most of it being destroyed. There were extremely large bare footprints, not paw prints, all over the campsite. We gathered up what was left of our backpacks as fast as we could and raced back through the woods to the vans. When we reached the vans, there were streaks of mud up and down each one of them, and on one of the vans there was a huge indent in the side of the sliding van door in the shape of an extremely large hand. After the incident last spring, we have yet to make any plans for the annual trip this year.
We hope that you have enjoyed this installment of the Bigfoot Bonanza at the Vault of Nightmares. Don't forget to also check out Dark Waters and Mr. Extreme's channels as well for the Bigfoot Bonanza videos. Stay safe and stay tuned. There's always more to come.